friends, I'm Rachel from EVPL Central. Welcome to Chapter Book Storytime, the Variety Pack. So today we are going to be reading Night Books by J.A. White. I will say this book is a little on the spooky side, so if that's not really your thing, that is okay. We have lots and lots of videos you can check out of other books if that is more your speed. But if you do like a spooky book, in this one we are going to meet Alex, who is sneaking out of his apartment at night whenever he accidentally stumbles into a bit of a fairy tale. And if that sounds like something you're interested, let's go ahead and get started. Chapter 1, The Wrong Floor. After his family had finally fallen asleep, Alex slung the backpack over his shoulder and snuck out of the apartment, easing the front door gently home so it didn't slam shut. The 8th floor hallway looked drearier than ever without any sunlight coming through its small windows. Alex lingered on the doormat, fighting the urge to return to his warm, comfortable bed. If you do that, he thought, you'll be the same old Alex Mosher tomorrow. Weirdo, freak, loser, is that what you want? No, he whispered. Before he could change his mind, Alex started toward the elevator at the end of the hall. During the day, snippets of his neighbors' lives leaked through the thin doors, muffled conversations, the loud blare of televisions, Miss Garcia's son practicing his violin. At this time of night, however, the hallway was nearly silent. The only sounds were a grimy light bulb that buzzed like an angry hornet and a soft rustling from Alex's backpack, as though its contents were struggling to escape their fate. Sorry, Alex thought, feeling a wave of guilt. I wish I didn't have to do this, but it's better this way. He reached the elevator and pressed the down button on the cracked panel. Far below him, ancient gears squealed away the silence. Alex winced and peeked over his shoulder, hoping that the sound didn't wake any of his neighbors. The stairs would have been a quieter option, but Alex wanted to reach his destination as quickly as possible, so he didn't have an opportunity to second-guess his decision. Ding! The elevator door jerked open with a pained squeak. Smudged mirrors paneled the walls. Alex stepped inside and clicked the B button. The basement was his favorite place in the entire apartment building. It was spooky and weird and packed ceiling high with towers of knickknacks left behind by former tenants, like a graveyard for unwanted items. The most amazing part, however, was the boiler, an iron monster built nearly 60 years ago. Alex called it Old Smoky. It was his destination tonight. The elevator's doors closed and the car began to descend in slow, jerky increments. Alex tapped his foot impatiently. Though his backpack was far lighter than usual, it seemed to weigh him down like an anchor. I'll feel better after they're gone, he thought. Just toss them in the flames and walk away. Don't even stick around to watch them burn. Of course, Alex could have just dumped the contents of his backpack down the trash chute and been done with it, but that seemed cruel. Cremating them in Old Smoky felt more honorable, like setting the body of a fallen warrior aflame. Alex figured he owed them a good death at least. After all, he was the one who had created them. The elevator stopped. The doors creaked open. Alex tilted his head in confusion. Instead of the basement, an unfamiliar hallway stretched out before him. He checked the digital display at the top of the elevator. 4. Must be broken, he thought, jabbing the B button with his index finger. The elevator didn't move. Alex sighed with frustration. Looks like I'm taking the stairs after all, he thought. He stepped off the elevator and headed toward the stairwell. The 4th floor had the same basic layout as the 8th, but it was noticeably darker. Alex glanced up at the light bulbs, wondering if a few of them had burned out, but they seemed to be working fine. For some strange reason, however, their glow didn't radiate as far as it should, as though the darkness of this particular hallway was harder to penetrate than the ordinary kind. Just my crazy imagination, Alex thought, ignoring the cold sensation creeping down his spine. The bulbs are probably just old, or he heard voices. They were coming from the apartment at the end of the hall. At first, Alex thought it was just the people who lived there. As he got closer, however, creepy music rose in the background and Alex realized that the voices belonged to characters from a movie. He broke into a big grin as he recognized the dialogue. That's Night of the Living Dead, he thought. Alex had been 4 years old the first time he saw the movie. He was supposed to have been asleep, but the strange sound coming from the living room had piqued his curiosity, and so he had crept out of his bed to investigate. His mom and dad were cuddled up on the couch, sharing a bowl of popcorn. Alex hid behind his dad's easy chair and trained his eyes on the television. He had never been so terrified or exhilarated in his life. By the time that his parents realized they had an unwelcome visitor, it was too late. Alex was in love. At the end of the month, his Thomas trains had been exiled to a bin in the basement, replaced by toy monsters, plastic fangs, and a stuffed ghost named Boo. He dismantled his Lego fire trucks and rocket ships and used the bricks to build a haunted house. At the library, Alex insisted on borrowing only the picture books with little Halloween labels on the spines, despite the fact that it was June. Night of the Living Dead had been his introduction to the world of creepy things, and for that reason, it held a special place in his heart. Hearing it now, an overpowering desire to watch the movie again fogged all other thoughts. Alex approached the door of apartment 4E, a static-filled soundtrack reeling him in like a fishing line, and pressed his ear against it. It was one of the earliest scenes in the movie, just before Barbara and her brother are attacked by a zombie in the graveyard. I've barely missed anything at all, Alex thought with excitement. He had for the moment completely forgotten about his backpack and his reason for coming out tonight. All he could think about was the movie. He was desperate to see it. If Alex had been thinking clearly, he might have realized that this did not make any sense. After all, he could watch Night of the Living Dead anytime he wanted to on his iPad. Surely that was the better choice than knocking on a stranger's door in the middle of the night. Unfortunately, Alex was not thinking clearly. His green eyes, usually so sharp and inquisitive behind their glasses, had gone uncharacteristically flat, and his mouth hung open in a baffled expression, giving him a striking resemblance to one of the zombies from the movie. Alex knocked on the door with 3 quick raps. A woman answered almost immediately, as though she had been expecting his arrival. "Well, look at this," she said, peering down at him. "A visitor!" The woman was in her late 20s with dark skin and short, spiky hair. She wore all black and a lot of makeup, especially around the eyes. "I'm sorry," Alex said, his mind swirling. "What am I doing here? I don't know why I knocked. I just heard..." "What did you hear?" she asked, leaning forward with an eager expression. "Tell me." "The movie." The woman smiled. There were tiny gaps between her narrow teeth, giving her the look of one of those weird, glowing fish that prowl the deepest parts of the ocean. "A movie?" she asked with genuine curiosity. "That's new. Which one?" Alex gave the woman a strange look. He could still hear the television blaring behind her, the zombie now banging on the window of Barbara's car, yet she was acting like she heard nothing at all. "Don't you know?" Alex asked. "Why should I? The movie's for you, not me." She opened the door wider. "You want to watch it?" she asked. "I bet it's one of your favorites." A beam of fear cut through the fog in Alex's thoughts. "It's the middle of the night and I'm having a conversation with a total stranger like it's the most normal thing in the world," he thought. "What's wrong with me?" He took a step back, intending to leave as quickly as possible, when he smelled something wonderful coming from the apartment. Freshly baked pumpkin pie, his favorite. He breathed in the comforting smell of nutmeg and cinnamon, and all his fear instantly disappeared. "This woman isn't a threat," he thought. "She's just a nice lady who likes horror movies like me." "The movie's Night of the Living Dead," Alex said. 1968, directed by George Romero. "Ah," said the woman. "How intriguing. And was I right? Is it one of your favorites?" "Top 10. Right between Let the Right One In and The Ring," Alex shrugged apologetically. "I like scary stuff." "You sound like my kind of kid," the woman replied, grinning. "It's crazy. I was just about to kick back and watch the movie when I thought, the only thing missing is someone to share this with, someone who really appreciates it. And here you are." She opened the door all the way, allowing Alex a view of a comfortable-looking couch and a coffee table piled with oatmeal raisin cookies and pumpkin pie. Across from this cozy setup, a huge TV played played the black and white images he longed to see. Barbara staggering toward the farmhouse where she would be trapped for the rest of the movie with zombies in hot pursuit. Alex took a step forward, entranced. "Well, don't just stand there gawking, silly boy," the woman said. "Come inside." Even later, when Alex knew that he had been under the influence of a powerful spell, he found it hard to believe that he had entered the apartment so easily. At the time, it was like his body was not his own, but a moth drawn to the flickering lights of the television. He crossed the threshold. The door clicked shut behind him. "Gotcha," the woman said under her breath. She slipped a cold hand around his wrist, and all the energy seemed to leave his body. Alex sank into the cushions of a nearby couch, barely able to keep his eyes open. The woman eased into the chair across from him. The smile had faded from her lips. "What's your name?" she asked. "Alexander." "Alex." "Which one?" "Alex," he said. He looked around the apartment in confusion. The television had vanished along with the coffee table and pumpkin pie. "Where did the TV go?" Alex asked. "It was never there." "No," he insisted. "I saw it." The apartment does what it can to get you inside. Different for everyone. A movie is an odd choice. Traditionally, it's some sort of food that draws them. Kids are always thinking with their stomachs, you know. I smelled pumpkin pie. There you go. It was becoming harder for Alex to focus. The room kept tilting back and forth, like when you step off the pirate ship ride at an amusement park. He felt like he might be ill. "I want to go home," he said. "Obviously, that's not going to happen, Alex." He turned in his seat, moving impossibly slow, hoping to make a mad dash for the door, except the door had vanished. The place where it had once stood was nothing but a blank wall. "Where did the door go?" he asked groggily. "Away," the woman said. "Don't worry, you won't be needing it anymore." "But that's not possible," Alex said. "Doors don't just... they can't..." "Haven't you figured it out yet?" she asked, grinning with pride. "I'm a witch, just like in a storybook." She touched a single fingernail to his forehead. "And you, little mouse, have fallen right into my trap." Alex tried to stand, but his legs had turned to jelly, and he collapsed to the floor instead. A wave of darkness crashed over him. Chapter 2. The Voice at the Door. Alex woke up in the lower half of a bunk bed. He had no idea where he was or how he had gotten there. He lay perfectly still, his body frozen with fear. Gradually, the events of the previous night returned to him. The elevator, the apartment, the witch. Except she's not really a witch, Alex thought, his mind racing. Witches aren't real. She's just some crazy lady who thinks she's a witch. But then, why did I see a TV that wasn't really there? Did she hypnotize me or something? Alex clutched his blanket and a question of more immediate concern popped in his head. Who's sleeping on the top bunk? He stared at the iron bars holding the mattress in place above him, listening carefully for breathing sounds. When he didn't hear anything, Alex slid to the floor and gently placed his foot on the bottom rung of the ladder connecting the two bunks. In one swift movement, he popped his head over the upper railing. There was no one there, just an old mattress without any sheets or a blanket. Alex let out a sigh of relief. I never knew a bunk bed could be so scary, he thought. The rest of the room was small and plainly furnished. There was a standing mirror in the corner and two doors. The first one Alex opened led to a closet, which was mostly empty except for some children's clothes hanging from the rod. Flipping through the shirts and pants and dresses of various sizes, Alex remembered something that the woman had said the previous night. Traditionally, it's some sort of food that draws them in. Them, he thought, with a sickening feeling of dread. I'm not the first. Of course, if he accepted what the woman had said at face value, that meant the apartment was capable of reading children's minds in order to lure them with the appropriate bait. Like a smarter version of the candy house in Hansel and Gretel, Alex thought. In my case, a scary movie did the trick. He stared at the clothes before him. But what about these other kids? What brought them here? The smell of chocolate? A friend's voice? No, Alex said, that's impossible. There's no such thing as magic. He slammed the door shut with such ferocity that the empty hangers tinkled together in response. Even if he rejected magic as a factor, it still left the disturbing possibility that he was just one of a long line of children who had slept in this room. And if he followed that train of thought to his final stop, Alex found himself facing an even more disturbing question. If he wasn't the first kid that she had taken, what had happened to the rest of them? Before his overactive imagination could supply any morbid answers, Alex crossed the room to the second door, nearly tripping over his backpack in the process. The door was normal in every way, except that it had 2 keyholes instead of 1. The upper keyhole was the usual kind, but the second bore a strange crescent shape. Probably a special lock, he thought, to keep anyone from escaping. Alex was so certain that attempting to open the door would be a dead end that he gasped when the knob turned in his hand. She must have forgotten to lock it, he thought with a faint glimmer of hope. Sucking in his breath, Alex opened the door as slowly and quietly as he could. The next room looked identical to the first. Simple bed, single closet, standing mirror in the corner. Alex stepped inside, wary of squeaking floorboards, and gently shut the door behind him. The moment he did, the door vanished and became a regular wall. "What?" Alex said, backing away in shock until he tripped over something on the floor. His backpack. "It can't be," he said, shaking his head. "That's still in the other room." After he checked the contents, however, there could be no doubt. Either his bag had somehow teleported from one room to another, or something even stranger had happened. Trembling slightly, he opened the closet door. Children's clothes hung from the rod. They were identical in every way to the ones that he had been examining just a few minutes before. "It's the same room," Alex said in astonishment. He opened the door with 2 keyholes and looked back and forth between the rooms, searching for the slightest difference. There wasn't any. He could even see the door open on the other side of the second room, and then an endless series of identical rooms beyond this, like a reflection in a maze of mirrors. Curious what would happen, Alex lifted the backpack and watched its twin rise in the air like a prop in a haunted house. It's a magical prison, he thought. There's no way to escape. Alex shut the door and took a seat on the edge of the bed. The wheels of his brain spun madly, trying to process the giant wrecking ball that had just tilted the world askew. Magic is real, he thought, his head in his hands. He stayed like this for a long time until he was struck by a second idea. Rising to his feet, Alex screamed as loud as he could while jumping up and down and pounding his fists against the wall, trying to make as much noise as possible. "Help! I've been captured by a crazy woman! Call the police!" This place may be magic, but it's still inside a New York City apartment building, he thought. Not some house in the middle of the woods. Someone will hear me. Someone will... The walls began to shake. As a lifetime resident of the East Coast, Alex had never experienced an earthquake. What he was seeing and feeling right now, however, floor vibrating, walls shaking, was just as he had imagined an earthquake would be. Terror squeezed the air from his lungs. At any moment, Alex was certain the floor would crack open and swallow him whole, or the ceiling would collapse, burying him beneath a mound of rubble. And then it was over. What was that? Alex thought. He fell to his knees and waited for his equilibrium to return. That couldn't have been an earthquake, not in New York, but then, what was it? Alex heard a scratching noise and saw the doorknob start to turn. He had just enough time to notice that a key had been inserted into the crescent keyhole, not the normal one, and then the witch entered the room. "Why are you screaming?" she asked. "This apartment is enchanted. There could be an entire orchestra playing in the living room right now, and no one beyond these walls would hear a single note." She was wearing a flowing black dress with black boots and black lipstick. Her long black nails came to 10 sharp points. Around her neck hung a beetle encased in amber. It was black. "She sure looks like a witch," Alex thought. "All she's missing is a broom and a pointy hat." A dozen keys dangled from a ring in her hand. Some were the typical kind, others were white and didn't look metallic at all. "There was an earthquake or something," Alex said. That was just the apartment settling itself. It happens from time to time. Really? Alex asked. That felt pretty. The woman vanished before his eyes. Boo! She whispered in his ear, now standing behind him. Alex screamed and stumbled backwards, nearly losing his balance. That was amazing, wasn't it? The woman asked, looking pleased with herself. Do you want to see it again? Alex shook his head, unable to speak. She's a witch, he thought. A real, live, honest-to-goodness witch. Please let me go, he finally managed the words, little more than a whisper. I won't tell anyone about this, really. Alan, right? She asked. Alex. Not Alexander, the woman said, remembering. I'm Natasha. The thing of it is, I can't let you leave. Not now, not ever. Why not? Alex asked, and then, in a voice that sounded impossibly small, he added, Are you going to do something bad to me? I'm a witch, she said. You're a child. We're not going to play checkers. Ever read any fairy tales? Alex nodded. Then you know how it is, she sighed with exasperation. I really don't have time for this today. I'm already late for an important meeting. Natasha looked him over, her eyes lingering on his stomach. She smirked. You don't look like much of a worker. A few too many ice cream sundaes, perhaps. But then, what should I do with you? You could let me go, Alex suggested. Oh, Natasha said, you're funny. Unfortunately, that's not the same as being useful. Whatever, if things don't work out, I'll just add you to my collection. She brushed her hands together in a cleaning up motion. Problem solved. What is that? Natasha checked her watch and let out a high-pitched scream. Now you've made me even later than before. You've only been here a few hours and you're already a problem. Not a good sign, Alan. She slipped through the door and slammed it shut behind her. Alex heard the bolt click home. Without any windows by which to judge the passing of time, the hours smudged together, making it difficult for Alex to determine how long he had been trapped inside the room. 4 hours, he wondered. 8? There was no use trying to escape. He had been back and forth between the two rooms at least a dozen times. He didn't bother screaming anymore. Alex believed Natasha when she said that no one could hear him. After all, he had seen her vanish before his eyes and magically teleport across the room. Being able to soundproof her apartment didn't seem like much of a stretch. Alex cried for a while. He tried not to, but he couldn't help it. He felt cold and scared and alone and a little disappointed. All his life he had loved scary stories, but now he was inside of one. It should have been fun. The problem was that the witches Alex had read about in books were story scary. This was real scary. It was a big difference. What is she going to do with me when she gets home tonight? Alex wondered. His imagination, as usual, leaped to the darkest conclusions. She might eat me, or boil me in a cauldron, or chop me up into ingredients for a spell. Gruesome images flashed through his mind, each worse than the last. Alex wanted to shut them off, but it wasn't as easy as turning a valve or flicking a switch. All he could do was wait it out. Finally, he heard footsteps. At first, Alex thought that Natasha had returned, and his heart began to drum in his chest. This is it, he thought. Only instead of unlocking the door, the mysterious visitor hesitated just outside the room. A long shadow stretched beneath the crack of the door. Hello? Alex asked, is somebody there? He heard a faint breathing behind the door. Please, he exclaimed, she's going to be back soon. You have to help me. The silence stretched on and on. Alex was starting to wonder if his imagination was getting the best of him again when he heard a girl's soft voice. She likes stories. Floorboards squeaked as the shadow beneath the door retreated. In moments, Alex was once again alone. Chapter 3. The Things Inside the Backpack. Alex knew he wasn't brave. He was terrified of roller coasters and pretty girls and losing his parents in a crowd. When older kids bumped into him in the hallway, intentionally or not, he always mumbled, "My bad," and kept walking. Even math tests made him sweat. Unfortunately, this was the type of situation where an unusual amount of bravery was required. Since Alex, by his own estimation, wasn't up to snuff, he tried to imagine what his big brother would do. It wasn't hard. John reacted to any sort of adversity with violence. They had a box full of broken video game controllers to prove it. He would have knocked her out the first chance he got, Alex thought. For the most part, Alex considered his older brother a walking meathead, just a few IQ points north of a zombie. But a John-style approach seemed like his best bet here. The moment that Natasha returned, he could shove her to the ground, grab her keys, dash out of the room, and lock the door behind him. I'll have to surprise her before she has a chance to cast any spells, Alex thought. That's the only way this will work. He pressed his foot against the leg of the bed in a sprinter's pose, his entire body angled toward the door. Every so often, Alex stretched his muscles or cracked his neck, but other than that, he remained still, imagining that he was a soldier on sentry duty. Finally, the doorknob turned. Alex charged. Natasha entered the room, raised her eyebrows at the sight of his lumbering body, and waved her hand dismissively. Alex felt something clutch his ankles with an iron grip, and his feet left the floor as he was yanked backward. After a painful landing, Alex looked behind him and saw the legs of the bed wrapped around his ankles like vines. As he watched, they withdrew and solidified into their previous shape. Natasha stared down at Alex with a look of resignation, like he was an errand that could no longer be put off. Dirty floor, an empty refrigerator. "My meeting went great," she exclaimed, as though Alex had asked. "New customer placed a huge order. We'll be paying double for it. Isn't that spectacular?" Despite his predicament, Alex was curious. Story witches cursed newborns and spackled houses with sugary treats. They didn't run businesses. "An order for what?" he asked. "What do you think? Magic-infused oils, of course. Huge market in it." "A hex for that annoying neighbor? Extra luck for a weekend getaway to Atlantic City?" "And love oils." She rolled her eyes in disgust. "I am so sick of love oils." Then again, business is business. Alex forced a smile. If he couldn't escape, he figured that he should at least stay on her good side. "Congratulations," he said. "That's really great." "So sweet," she said, patting him on the head. "Unfortunately, since everything here is running so well, I don't want to throw any new cogs into the machine. If it ain't broke, don't fix it." She raised her hands in the air, and they began to glow with blue light. "Just be a doll and stay still. And whatever you do, don't close your eyes, like a photograph." Natasha lowered her hands toward Alex's shoulders. He trembled with fear, knowing that there was nowhere to run, nothing he could do to stop her. "I just want to go home," Alex thought. "I just want to see my family again." Suddenly he remembered what the girl had said. It was a long shot, but he had no other ideas. "Do you want to hear a story?" he asked. Natasha paused, cocked her head to one side. "What kind of story?" she said. "Scary." Regarding Alex's skepticism, she flicked the blue light from her hands. "Interesting," she said. "I wonder." She shook her head. "No, you're just a boy. What kind of scary story can you know? Something you read in a library book? Heard around a campfire? I have no use for the same old tales." "You couldn't have heard these," Alex said. "I made them up." "That's even worse," Natasha snapped. "I need real scary stories, not lame kitty tales." Alex flushed with anger. "My stories are scary," he exclaimed. "Too scary. That's why I was going to burn them all up last night." "That doesn't make any sense," she said. "If your stories are as good as you claim, why would you destroy them?" Alex remained silent. His storytelling instincts told him that he should hold back on the details for now. Once Natasha knew everything, she wouldn't be interested anymore. And if he wanted to survive, he needed to keep her interested. "Fine," she said. Natasha clapped her hands together, and a shadowy chair rose from the floor. She eased into it and stared at him expectantly. "Tell us a story. Let's see what you've got." Alex picked up his backpack with sweaty palms. "What are you doing?" Natasha asked. "My night books are inside," he said. Night books. The journals I write my stories in, he said. I have trouble sleeping, bad dreams. The only way to get rid of them is to write them down. Night books, Natasha said. She smacked her lips together as though tasting the word. I like that. Bending down on one knee, Alex unzipped the front of the backpack and withdrew a marbled composition book with his name printed neatly on the front. Which story should I read? He thought. There were dozens of possibilities in this night book alone. Alex knew that if he picked a bad one, he wouldn't get a second chance. Something short, Natasha said, growing impatient. An appetizer, to see if I want you to stay for the entire meal. Alex spread the night book open, flipped through the pages with shaking hands. Finally, he settled on something he thought might work. If she doesn't like this, I'm a goner, he thought, and he started to read. Lost Dog. The first time that Greg saw the dog was at his friend Eric's house. The two boys had been hanging out all day, and after finally getting bored of video games, they went outside to throw the frisbee around. The dog was sitting on the front porch. It was a medium-sized animal with mangy white fur, like an old undershirt that had been worn one time too many. Neither boy recognized the breed. Hey there, said Eric, bending down to scratch the dog's neck. The dog didn't wag its tail and stared up at Eric with sad eyes. Must be lost, Greg said, keeping his distance. His mother, who had been bitten when she was a girl, had always warned him to stay away from strange animals. Check the tag. Maybe he belongs to one of your neighbors. Eric inspected the tag on the chain collar. It was a shiny black triangle without any name or address. Weird, said Eric, pinching the strange tag between his fingers. Feel this. It's as cold as ice. I'm good, Greg said, backing away. The dog was looking at him with those sad eyes. Greg couldn't say why, but he suddenly wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible. I'm heading home. The next morning, his parents sat him down at the dining room table and gave him the tragic news. There had been an electrical fire while Eric and his family were sleeping, and none of them had survived. A year passed. Greg was still sad when he thought about Eric, but not as sad as he used to be. One day, he was walking home from school when he passed the Wilsons' house. The lawn hadn't been mowed in a while, and mail was overflowing from the mailbox. No one held these things against them. Their daughter, Renee, was sick. Not stay from home from school sick, but the bad kind that required overnight stays at the hospital. A white dog stared out at him from the Wilsons' front window. Until that point, Greg had forgotten all about the lost dog that he had seen at Eric's house the day of the fire. Now the memory came rushing back. It can't be the same one, he thought. Can it? He crossed the lawn to get a closer look. The dog sat as still as a statue and stared back at him with sad eyes. A black triangle dangled from its collar. Greg ran home. The next morning, his mom got a phone call that made her break down into tears. Renee Wilson had died in her sleep. After that, Greg started looking for the white dog everywhere he went. He never saw it. Eventually, he became convinced that the dog had just been a figment of his imagination. One beautiful summer day, Greg went to an amusement park that had just built a new roller coaster. It was one of the tallest in the world, and Greg had been waiting all year to ride it. At first, his mom said no. There had been stories online about some safety concerns, but Greg finally talked her into it. He waited for hours to get the front seat. As he pulled the shoulder harness over his chest, he knew that it had been worth it. The car climbed the hill ever so slowly, higher and higher and higher. Greg looked down and gasped at how small the people had gotten below him. He grinned. This is going to be great, he thought. There were tiny steps along the side of the tracks, just in case a worker needed to get up there and fix something. At the very top of the hill was a small platform just big enough for someone to stand on. The white dog was there, watching the coaster ascend. Its eyes looked sadder than ever. Sunlight glinted off its triangular collar. Greg knew that the dog's presence could mean only one thing. "Stop the ride!" he shouted, struggling against his shoulder harness. It was too late. The roller coaster was already plunging down the first drop. All around Greg, People started to scream. Alex closed the night book. Natasha stared at him for a long time, eyes narrowed. She hated it, he thought. I've blown my only chance. You really wrote that? She finally asked. Alex nodded. You sure? Natasha said. Maybe you read a story that you liked in a book and you copied it down, told everyone that you were the real writer. I would never do that, Alex insisted, the anger for now overriding his fear. It's my story. I can even tell you where I got the idea. My friend found this dog one day and I got to wondering, what if the Grim Reaper had a pet? Natasha raised her eyebrows in amusement. Most kids would have just thrown the dog a ball and called it a day, she said. That's other kids, Alex said, twisting the night book in his hands. They play with dogs. I play with what ifs. I wish I could be more like them, but it's not something I can control. No, Natasha said with a knowing smile. I imagine not. She continued to stare at him, absent-mindedly tweezing a strand of shadows from the arm of the magical chair and spooling it around her index fingers. Did you like it? Alex finally asked, hating the uncertainty in his voice, his need to know. He rarely shared. Did you like it? Alex finally asked, hating the uncertainty in his voice. He needed to know. He rarely shared his writing, but when he did, his hunger for immediate feedback bordered on desperate. Wrong question, Natasha said. She rose from the shadow chair, which dissipated into air, and pressed her ear against the nearest wall like a safe cracker. What are you doing? Alex asked. Shh. Natasha listened closely. Finally, she nodded with satisfaction. Good, she said. Yes, that will do. What will do? Alex asked. What are you talking about? The witch ignored him and opened the door leading out of the room. Alex caught a glimpse of an ordinary-looking hallway. Sleep well, storyteller, Natasha said just before leaving the apartment. Tomorrow, your real work begins. She locked the door behind her. Okay, and that is where we are going to have to end this one for now. If you are looking forward to seeing what Alex's time with Natasha looks like the rest of the way, and if he ever manages to get out and maybe see some more of his spooky stories, you can start the book at chapter 4 is where we got to. You can call or come to one of our locations to pick up a copy. You can also get it on either the Libby app or the Hoopla app as both an ebook and e-audiobook. So you have a lot of options of how to keep this story going. And I hope you guys enjoyed. I will see you all next time. Bye.